So, I'm not in my dorm, but I'm at Vassar, one of my buddy's rooms. So ignore the boobies if you see him in the background. All right. Instead of arguing about important things that are actually important to my future and all that, I'm going to argue about Pokemon still. Because I'm still holding strong. I'm holding strong with my view. Bad Pokemon shouldn't have to exist. And I'm especially disagreeing with Griffin on this for the reasons that he puts forward. It's not just a children's game. It should be able to function well as a game that can be taken seriously outside of that, and it can still work as a children's game. If you're looking for how it's grounded in reality, Pokemon is the last thing that you want to mention for that. If it's like some things are weaker than others, then yeah, I'll mention that later too. But the thing is that Pokemon is so far from reality that anybody that's taking it seriously in that way needs to get like checked. And look, like with the majority of people dogfighting as their career and free healthcare, but lemonade that costs more than like a bike, which is also infinitely expensive. Yeah, I give up. Okay. The improvements are already in there. If you're looking for which Pokemon are stronger than others, the evolution thing that is at the core of Pokemon is already making some Pokemon better than others. If you have a lower level Pokemon than another one, it's because you haven't been training enough. And just making your secondary things across the line where some Pokemon are just better than others, I think is important to some extent. But having some that are just so weak that even if you train them well, they will be bad and not be able to hold up to any sort of scrutiny. I think that that's where you run into a lot of problems. Leveling up already exists as improvements. I think that Griffin even said, like, in his video that he felt satisfied as a kid when he would improve to different Pokemon, but you already do that when you evolve. And that's already there. So I think that you shouldn't have to bother with bad Pokemon for that lesson because you're already dealing with the differences between good and bad Pokemon. And tools, you can have crappy Pokemon that then become good Pokemon and still have that as a tool, and it still works fine. Like, part of this, and what I'll get to, I think, later, is that there's a whole tier of Pokemon that have two evolutions that if they had a third one would be worth your time. But they don't, so they waste your time. But for Steven's arguments, there'd be no benchmark, and that's true to some extent, but I think that your benchmarks are already really screwed up, because if you're looking for like how strong you want your stuff to be, then there are very obvious choices in which Pokemon you choose, and I think that that is restrictive. So I made a graph. All right. Down here at the bottom, you have your stuff that is not worth your time at all, like your Beedrill cycles. Then you have like Raticate, which is still not worth your time. And I think that just about the worst thing that should be allowed is something like Bellsprout, where you have 3 levels of evolution. And you can almost make it worth your time, but it'll still be bad, and that's recognizable. That some will just be worth more. Then you have like Gardevoir, Aggron, which is an obvious choice, and then your starter, and then Legends. And Legends just are insane anyways. You want some better than others, of course. But I think that should only be to some extent. And especially because if it's about trial and error, you want what you have in the beginning especially, to not be wasting everyone's time. If you had more things that are kind of like Aggron or Gardevoir in the beginning, instead of like the bug Pokemon that are always there, that will never be good no matter how good you make them. They will be wasting your time. Their stats do not lie, no matter how much EV or IV training, which is interesting, but, you know, intricate and whatnot, and not internet-based, but whatever. Okay, like, you can't make a Beedrill worth your time. Let's see. It's less interesting and challenging. I think that what's really uninteresting and challenging is when you play Pokemon Ruby, and there's a very obvious layout of what your team is supposed to be. Your starter, Aggron, Gardevoir, and then something that you find mid-game. But in the beginning of the game, those are your 3 that you want to be dealing with. being able to have options is a lot of what I'm looking for. And I mean, I think that Pokemon Red is slightly better at this, but when you're given very viable options of this is good and this is not good, then that's where you just stop having fun, especially if you're replaying. And everything, especially what you were saying, and different appeals and what you're looking for, yes, that's what I want. That's what I'm asking for, is that make everything fit into something. And it's not too hard. Like, if you give everything that's a crappy 2-level one an extra evolution that makes it actually worth your time, I think that's where it'd be good. Like, if Zigzagoon had a 3rd evolution that could work well as a tank that could also do evasion and healing, that's something that would be out there and would actually be worthwhile on your team and be a normal type and maybe fit into like a subcategory. And the mixing and matching that you can do for the different places where it can do in your team, the different different actual type that it is, dark, whatever, and the moves that it has and the abilities, that's enough variety to give you loads and loads of Pokemon, except none of them need to be bad. And its quality can be ensured in what level it is. And you want to make good special, but I still think that there's enough variety that you can do that. And the challenge, I think that you can still do that too. The challenge of raising Pokemon to a certain level is important, and going against well put together teams and gyms is also really difficult. And I think that that's what's fun about Pokemon. And that was a silly long rant, but I hope that you guys understand where I'm coming from with this. Oh my god, I just wasted 7 minutes of my life and more because I drew out the whole argument just talking about Pokemon. Oh my god. Forgive me.